Rain fell in a steady curtain over the city, blurring the glittering lights of the skyline. Inside the marble-floored lobby of the five-star Clarendon Hotel, the air was warm, scented with lilies, and charged with a tension so thick it could be felt. Olivia Bennet stood there, her silk scarf clutched in her hand, her eyes fixed on the glass elevator as it descended. She looked elegant, but there was a stillness about her, a quiet strength that came from years of holding herself together when everything around her was falling apart. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing Ethan Caldwell, her ex-husband, looking every inch the powerful billionaire he was. Tailored suit, polished shoes, that confident smile that had once made her believe in him. Beside him stood a younger woman in a crimson dress that clung to her like a second skin, Madison Reed, the mistress. Madison's eyes lit with the satisfaction of someone who thought they had already won. She stepped forward, looping her arm through Ethan's and tilting her head in mock sympathy. "Oh, Olivia," she said, her voice sweet and poisonous at the same time. "You're still trying? You can't stop us. You never could." The words cut sharper than any blade. Not because they were true, they weren't, but because they were delivered with such smug certainty. The kind of certainty that came from thinking money and youth could erase loyalty, history, and love. Olivia didn't flinch. She didn't let the anger rise to her face. Instead, she simply smiled. A small, calm smile that made Madison's eyes flicker for the briefest second. It wasn't the smile of someone defeated. It was the smile of someone who knew something the other didn't. "Enjoy your evening," Olivia said softly, adjusting her scarf before walking past them. Her heels clicking against the marble. She didn't turn back. She didn't need to. But as she stepped outside into the rain, her mind was already turning, not toward the past, not toward what she had lost, but toward what was coming. Because Olivia Bennet had been underestimated before, and every time she had walked away with more than anyone thought possible. Tonight was no different. Across the street, parked discreetly under a row of trees, was a black sedan. Inside sat a man in a dark coat, watching her through the windshield. When their eyes met, he gave a single nod. It was the signal. The plan had already been set in motion weeks ago. Madison and Ethan thought they were in control, but in truth, they were already playing on Olivia's board. And Olivia always played to win. She slipped into the car without a word, the door closing behind her with a muted thud. The driver pulled away from the curb, blending into the wet streets, leaving behind the image of the woman they thought was powerless. But Madison's words still echoed in Olivia's ears, not as a wound, but as fuel. And in that moment, Olivia promised herself that Madison Reed would learn exactly what it meant to be stopped. The ride through the city was quiet except for the sound of rain against the windows. Olivia kept her gaze on the blurred streetlights, her mind replaying Madison's smirk. Every insult, every condescending glance from that woman had been filed away in Olivia's memory like pieces of evidence. Beside her, in the back seat, sat Marcus Hale, her attorney and one of the sharpest legal strategists in the state. He was the kind of man who rarely smiled, but always delivered results. "You sure you're ready for this?" Marcus asked, his voice low, almost swallowed by the hum of the car. Olivia turned her head slightly, her eyes calm but cold. "Madison thinks this is about Ethan's love. Ethan thinks it's about money. Neither of them realizes it's about control, and I'm taking it back." Marcus gave a slow nod. "Then it's time we start with the board vote." That night, Olivia wasn't going home. Instead, the car turned toward the headquarters of Caldwell Enterprises, the billion-dollar empire Ethan had built. Or rather, the empire Olivia had helped him build during the 15 years they were married. She had been there from the very first investment pitch, the sleepless nights, the risky deals. She knew every corner of that company. The divorce had stripped her of her title as co-owner, but not of her shares. And what Madison didn't know, what Ethan had forgotten, was that Olivia still had allies in the boardroom. As the sedan glided into the underground parking garage, Marcus handed her a slim leather folder. Inside were documents that could shift the balance of power in Caldwell Enterprises overnight. "Sign here," Marcus said, pointing to the page. "Once we file this, you'll have the right to call an emergency vote. Ethan won't see it coming." Olivia's pen hovered over the paper for just a moment before she signed with a steady hand. When they stepped out into the dimly lit garage, Olivia pulled her coat tighter against the chill. She thought back to the early days, when Ethan had been just a man with ambition, and she had believed in him without question. Back then, they had made decisions together. Now, he made them with Madison. But that was about to change. Marcus checked his watch. "We have 48 hours before the vote. In the meantime, you'll need to keep your composure. Madison will try to provoke you." Olivia's lips curved into the same calm smile she'd given Madison earlier. "Let her try. Every word she speaks in public will only work in my favor." They rode the elevator up to the quiet, empty executive floor. The city stretched out beyond the glass walls, the rain now a soft mist. Olivia placed her hand against the cool glass, looking out at the skyline. Somewhere out there, Ethan and Madison were laughing over expensive wine, certain of their power. They had no idea that the clock had already started ticking. Somewhere deep inside her, the part of Olivia that had been wounded and humiliated began to fade. In its place was something sharper, stronger. And as she stood in that empty office, she made one final silent vow. When the moment came, neither Ethan nor Madison would see it coming, until it was far too late. Olivia Bennett was not born into wealth. She grew up in a modest two-bedroom house in the suburbs, where the sound of the washing machine doubled as background music to her childhood. Her father was a mechanic, her mother a school secretary. Money was always counted twice before it was spent, and luxuries were rare. But what Olivia lacked in resources, she made up for in determination. From a young age, she understood the value of persistence. She worked part-time at the local library through high school, saving every dollar for college. Her grades earned her a scholarship, and her relentless work ethic earned her respect from professors who saw in her something rare: grit. It was during her second year at university that she met Ethan Caldwell. He wasn't a billionaire then, just a young man with big ideas and the kind of charm that made people want to believe in him. He was studying finance, she was majoring in business administration. They met in the campus coffee shop, both buried in textbooks. Ethan had leaned over with that easy smile. "Do you believe in partnerships?" he asked. She laughed, thinking it was a pickup line. She didn't know that question would define the next 15 years of her life. They married 3 years later, pooling their limited resources to start Caldwell Enterprises. In the beginning, it was nothing but a cramped office space above a printing shop, a second-hand desk, and 2 laptops. They worked long nights, sometimes sleeping on the office couch. She handled contracts, negotiations, and finances, while Ethan worked the investor circuits, convincing people to fund their vision. Olivia never cared about the spotlight. She was the backbone, the strategist, the planner, the one who saw the roadblocks before they appeared. When Caldwell Enterprises finally broke into the high-end real estate market, Ethan's face was the one in magazines, but Olivia's fingerprints were on every deal. Her role in the company was never just as the wife. She was the partner, and for a long time, they were unstoppable. But success changes people. It started with small things. Ethan coming home later, business trips that didn't quite add up, the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his suits. Olivia didn't want to believe it. She told herself it was stress, that the man she had built everything with couldn't betray her. But then came Madison Reed. Younger, flashier, the type of woman who turned heads when she walked into a room. Madison had been hired as a marketing consultant for one of Caldwell's high-profile projects. Within months, rumors began. By the time Olivia confronted Ethan, the truth was undeniable. The divorce was swift, public, and brutal. Ethan leveraged his influence to paint Olivia as bitter and controlling. Madison played the supportive, misunderstood partner. Olivia, unwilling to drag their personal life through the mud, stayed silent. Silence cost her. She lost her role in the company. Her friends in their social circle chose sides, and most didn't choose hers. But she kept her shares. And she kept her composure. Because while they thought they had erased her from the picture, Olivia was quietly redrawing the frame. And now, years later, they were about to see the full picture she'd been painting all along. After the divorce, Olivia moved into a smaller apartment on the quieter side of the city. It was nothing like the penthouse she had once called home, but it had something more valuable: peace. For the first few months, she kept to herself. She cooked simple meals, took long walks in the park, and rediscovered what it felt like to breathe without the weight of Ethan's shadow. But peace did not erase the sting of betrayal, nor did it silence the whispers in her social circles. Every gala she wasn't invited to, every charity event where Madison stood proudly on Ethan's arm, was a reminder of how far she had been pushed out. And yet, Olivia didn't fight for her old place. She didn't need to, because she knew she wasn't done. While Madison was busy posting curated photos of luxury trips and dinners, Olivia was meeting quietly with industry players Ethan had long ignored: up-and-coming developers, sustainable housing advocates, tech-driven property firms. She invested in ideas Ethan would have dismissed as too small or too risky. Her approach was different now. She wasn't building an empire for someone else's name. She was building her own. And slowly, without fanfare, her investments began to pay off. A small housing project in Portland won a national sustainability award. A tech startup she backed was acquired by a major corporation. These were not headlines Ethan or Madison followed, but they were laying the groundwork for something bigger. Still, every time Olivia crossed paths with Madison in public, the younger woman's smile carried the same unspoken message: "You lost. I won." Olivia would only nod politely, letting Madison believe whatever she wanted. She had learned something important in her years beside Ethan. True power isn't loud. It doesn't need to be announced. It moves quietly, shaping outcomes before anyone realizes it's there. That's why, when Marcus Hale approached her with the opportunity to leverage her remaining shares in Caldwell Enterprises, she didn't hesitate. She had stayed in the shadows long enough. The night she signed those papers in the underground garage, she wasn't just preparing for a boardroom vote. She was setting the stage for her return, not as Ethan's ex-wife, not as the woman scorned, but as the woman who would decide the company's future. In her mind, she could already see the moment. Madison's confident expression cracking, Ethan's voice losing its edge, the board turning their attention toward her. But Olivia knew better than to rush. Revenge, if it was to be satisfying, had to be done with precision. And she had the patience for it. So she waited. She planned. She watched. And with every passing day, she felt the tide shifting, the balance of power inching back into her hands. What Ethan and Madison didn't know was that the first move had already been made, and the next would change everything. Caldwell Enterprises was more than just a corporation. It was a fortress of glass and steel, 25 stories high, with panoramic views of the city. The top floors were reserved for executives, while the lower levels buzzed with designers, analysts, and brokers. It was here, in this gleaming tower, that fortunes were made and destroyed with the flick of a pen. Ethan Caldwell ruled this empire with the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. Madison, now officially his fiancée, had slipped seamlessly into the role of future Mrs. Caldwell, showing up at board luncheons and charity auctions as though she had always belonged. She knew how to charm investors, but her real skill was in playing the part of Ethan's greatest supporter. What neither of them expected was for Olivia to walk back into this building. Her first visit after the divorce was quiet, almost too quiet. She arrived without warning, her steps deliberate, her expression unreadable. Employees who had once worked under her stopped in mid-sentence as she passed, some avoiding her gaze, others offering small nods of respect. Olivia noticed everything: the subtle changes in the decor, the new faces in the finance department, the way Madison's portrait now hung in the charity wing where Olivia's had once been. It stung, but it also fueled her. She wasn't here to reminisce. She was here to take stock. Marcus had advised her to treat Caldwell Enterprises like a chessboard. Every executive, every project, every department head was a piece. Some were loyal to Ethan, but some remembered the days when Olivia was the one ensuring their bonuses were paid on time and their families had health insurance. Those were the pieces she would move first. That afternoon, she scheduled private lunches with two senior executives who had been quietly sidelined since Madison's arrival. Both men had worked with Olivia for over a decade. Both had been overlooked for promotions Ethan had handed to Madison's friends. Over coffee, Olivia didn't speak of revenge. She spoke of stability, growth, and restoring the company's integrity. By the time the check arrived, she had their quiet agreement. Meanwhile, Madison was busy preparing for the company's annual investor gala, a black tie event held in the grand ballroom of the Clarendon Hotel. It was the perfect opportunity for Ethan and Madison to flaunt their dominance. Madison planned every detail down to the champagne labels, certain the evening would be a triumph. Olivia had other plans for that night. From her vantage point, the gala wasn't just a party, it was a stage, and stages were for performances. She intended to give them one they would never forget. But first, she needed to ensure that when the curtain rose, the audience was already on her side. And that meant turning the quiet murmurs in the boardroom into a chorus loud enough to shake Ethan's throne. The days leading up to the gala were a masterclass in subtle maneuvering. Olivia didn't make grand entrances or bold declarations. She moved like water, quiet, steady, shaping the landscape without force. Her first step was to reconnect with the department heads who had seen her as more than Ethan's wife. These were people who remembered the early years, when she stayed in the office until midnight, ordering pizza for the whole team, making sure deadlines were met without burning people out. They still respected her, and more importantly, they still trusted her. At a discreet cafe tucked into a side street, she met with Helena Ward, the company's head of legal affairs. Helena had been the one to draft most of Caldwell's major contracts, back when Olivia still had an office on the 18th floor. She also happened to dislike Madison with a quiet but unmistakable intensity. "I heard you've been active lately," Helena said, her tone more curious than cautious. Olivia smiled faintly. "Let's just say I've been reminded of what's mine and what's worth protecting." Helena leaned in. "You know the board respects you, some of them even miss you, but they won't act unless they believe you have the leverage to make changes." Olivia slid a slim folder across the table. "Then, let's give them proof." Inside were financial inconsistencies, small, easy-to-overlook transactions from one of Caldwell's overseas projects. To the untrained eye, they were meaningless. To Helena, they were red flags that could trigger a full internal review. And internal reviews had a way of shaking confidence in leadership. By the end of their coffee, Helena had agreed to be ready when the moment came. Meanwhile, Madison remained blissfully unaware. She was too busy selecting her gown for the gala and arranging a photo spread with a lifestyle magazine. She believed Olivia had faded into irrelevance, and Ethan encouraged that belief. It was exactly what Olivia wanted. 2 days before the gala, Marcus called. "I've secured enough preliminary support for the vote," he said. "But you'll need to show strength in public, not hostility. Strength. The gala will be your first move." Olivia stood at her apartment window, looking out over the city lights. "They think this is their celebration. I'll make sure it's their warning." The morning of the event, she had a package delivered to the hotel ballroom, a donation check in Caldwell Enterprises' name to a children's housing charity. It wasn't unusual for the company to make such donations, but this one came with a stipulation. It would be presented that night, and Olivia Bennett would be the one to hand it over. By the time Ethan received the paperwork, it was too late to change the program without causing a scene. Madison was livid, but Ethan brushed it off. "Let her have her little moment," he said. "It'll make us look gracious." Olivia knew better. When she stepped onto that stage in front of investors, board members, and the press, it wouldn't just be a photo op. It would be the opening move of the game they didn't even know they were playing. The Clarendon Hotel ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers, the air filled with the murmur of expensive conversations and the clink of champagne flutes. Gold-trimmed invitations had ensured the guest list was an exclusive mix of investors, board members, and media representatives. Every detail, from the floral arrangements to the live string quartet, had Madison's signature touch. She stood near the stage, radiant in a gold gown, greeting guests with the polished smile of a woman who believed she owned the room. Ethan moved through the crowd beside her, shaking hands, accepting compliments, radiating the kind of confidence only billionaires seemed to possess. Olivia arrived without fanfare. No flashing cameras, no dramatic entrance. Just the quiet grace of a woman who knew she didn't need spectacle to command attention. She wore a deep navy evening gown, simple yet impeccably tailored, her hair swept back to reveal diamond studs Ethan had given her years ago. The symbolism was deliberate. Heads began to turn. Conversations paused. Those who recognized her exchanged quick whispers. Madison's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before returning to its rehearsed warmth. "Olivia," Madison said smoothly when their eyes met. "What a surprise." Olivia returned the smile with polite warmth. "I was invited, and I'm here for a good cause." Ethan stepped in, his voice low but sharp. "Don't make a scene tonight." Her eyes softened, almost amused. "I wouldn't dream of it." When the evening's program began, the Master of Ceremonies announced the presentation of a significant donation to the Children's Housing Initiative. "This year's donation comes from Caldwell Enterprises," he said, "and will be presented by a very special guest, Olivia Bennett." The crowd murmured, the surprise palpable. Madison's expression froze, but she quickly composed herself as Olivia walked onto the stage with calm confidence. The check was enormous, both in size and amount. Olivia accepted the microphone, her voice steady, carrying easily through the hall. "Tonight is about building futures," she began. "It's about creating stability for those who need it most. Caldwell Enterprises was built on the belief that we can shape not only skylines but lives." She paused, letting her gaze sweep the room. "I was proud to be part of that vision from the very beginning, and I remain committed to ensuring it continues, not just in profit, but in purpose." There was a subtle emphasis on the last word, enough to make more than a few board members glance at Ethan. Olivia handed the check to the charity representative, smiling for the cameras. The applause was genuine, if tinged with curiosity. As she stepped off the stage, she passed Madison, leaning in just enough for only her to hear. "This is just the beginning." Madison's fingers tightened on her champagne flute, and in that moment, she realized Olivia wasn't here to reclaim her place. She was here to take the whole game. The rest of the gala unfolded like a perfectly choreographed play, at least for Olivia. She moved through the crowd with effortless composure, speaking briefly with key investors, many of whom hadn't seen her in years. She didn't talk about the past. Instead, she asked thoughtful questions about their current projects, subtly aligning herself with their interests. It was a reminder of how sharp she had always been, and how different her approach was from Madison's showy charm. Across the room, Madison kept glancing toward her, the unease growing behind her smile. She had spent years positioning herself as Ethan's right hand, the woman everyone should turn to. But now, in just one night, Olivia had drawn the room's attention without lifting her voice or raising her hand. Ethan, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, pulled Olivia aside near the edge of the ballroom. "What are you trying to do here?" he asked, his voice low and tight. "Support a good cause," Olivia replied, her tone calm, but her eyes carried an edge he couldn't ignore. "Isn't that what Caldwell Enterprises stands for?" "This isn't your stage anymore," Ethan said, his jaw tightening. Olivia tilted her head slightly. "Then why do I seem to be the one they're listening to?" Before he could respond, Marcus Hale appeared at her side, holding a champagne glass. His presence was deliberate, a silent signal to Ethan that Olivia wasn't operating alone. Marcus exchanged a polite greeting with Ethan, then turned to Olivia. "The board members you wanted to speak with are in the side lounge." Olivia nodded and excused herself, leaving Ethan standing in the soft glow of the chandeliers, frustration flickering in his eyes. In the lounge, the atmosphere was quieter, more intimate. 5 board members sat around a low table, drinks in hand. They welcomed Olivia with polite smiles that turned warmer as she joined their conversation. She didn't waste time on small talk. "I know you've all noticed certain changes in the company's direction," she began. "The focus has shifted. Projects are being prioritized for show rather than sustainability. And while that may bring short-term applause, it risks long-term stability." Her words struck a chord. Heads nodded subtly. "I believe Caldwell Enterprises can have both, profit and purpose," she continued. "But that requires leadership that understands the balance." She didn't say Ethan's name. She didn't have to. By the time she left the lounge, she had secured verbal support from 3 members and interest from the other 2. Marcus caught her eye as she returned to the ballroom and gave a barely noticeable nod. Confirmation that the night had been a success. Madison, watching from across the room, could feel the shift in the air, even if she didn't understand the specifics. When the gala finally ended, Olivia walked out into the cool night, as the sound of laughter and clinking glasses fading behind her. The city lights stretched before her, and she felt the weight of the moment settle into place. The first move had been made in full view of everyone, and the next would force Ethan and Madison into a corner they couldn't escape. The morning after the gala, Olivia woke to the sound of her phone buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand. At first, she assumed it was Marcus with an update. But when she saw the number of missed calls and text messages, her chest tightened. Headlines flooded her newsfeed. Ex-wife crashes Caldwell Gala, stirs boardroom drama. Olivia Bennett's surprise speech raises questions about motives. The photos were worse. Carefully selected shots where Olivia's expression looked calculating, paired with captions implying she had shown up uninvited and disruptive. The narrative was clear. She was being painted as the bitter ex-wife trying to claw her way back into relevance. Olivia's stomach knotted. This was Ethan's doing. His PR team worked fast, and they knew exactly how to twist an image. Madison's fingerprints were probably on it too, ensuring the coverage struck at Olivia's credibility. Marcus called. "They're trying to control the story," he said bluntly. "It's not illegal, but it's strategic. If the board believes you're creating instability, it could weaken our position before the vote." "I should have expected this," Olivia murmured, staring out the window at the gray morning sky. Ethan doesn't like to be challenged. Her phone buzzed again, this time with an email from the charity she had supported the night before. The director apologized for the confusion surrounding her presentation, explaining that Caldwell Enterprises had clarified the event's original plan. The subtext was obvious. They were distancing themselves from her to avoid friction with Ethan. It stung more than she expected. By midday, Olivia's name was trending on social media, with comments ranging from sympathetic to scathing. Friends who had stayed quiet during her divorce now avoided her messages entirely. That afternoon, Marcus met her at her apartment, his expression grim. "They're not just attacking your image. They've pushed forward an internal audit request claiming your presence at the gala violated the non-compete clause from your divorce settlement." Olivia blinked. "That clause doesn't apply to charitable events." Marcus's mouth tightened. "They're betting you'll waste energy defending yourself instead of preparing for the vote." It was a clever move, and for the first time in years, Olivia felt the familiar weight of doubt pressing against her chest. She had been so careful, so deliberate, and yet Ethan and Madison had managed to put her on the defensive overnight. She spent the evening pacing her living room, replaying every moment of the gala in her head. Had she been too bold? Too obvious? The thought that maybe she had miscalculated gnawed at her. By midnight, she was sitting in the dark with a glass of wine, the city lights casting long shadows across the room. The silence felt heavier than usual, and for the first time since this began, Olivia wondered if she had underestimated just how far Ethan and Madison were willing to go to keep her out. Sleep didn't come. When it finally did, it was shallow and full of noise. Camera shutters, whispers, a cold ballroom with too many eyes. By morning, Olivia felt older than she had in years. She made coffee and stood at the window, watching buses breathe steam on the street. For a moment, she wished she could be invisible again, the way she had been in the small apartment right after the divorce. Quiet, unremarkable, unseen. Her phone rang. It was Helena Ward. "You should come in," Helena said. "There's movement." Olivia arrived at Helena's office with a scarf tied tight at her neck, like armor. Helena shut the door and slid a document across the desk. "Madison filed a formal complaint with the Compliance Committee at dawn. She claims you attempted to influence the board with a charitable act arranged without proper approval." Olivia kept her face still. The donation was routine. The program's team signed off. "True," Helena said, "but they're framing it as a misuse of branding to sway votes. It's flimsy, but it gives them an excuse to drag you through a review." Olivia sat back, feeling the tiredness sink into her bones. "They want me to show up defensive. They want me to look like trouble." Helena's gaze softened. "You're not trouble. You're memory, and memory scares people who want to rewrite the past." The words landed like a hand on her shoulder. Olivia nodded once. "What about the overseas irregularities?" "I'm ready," Helena said. "But if we go now, Ethan will call it retaliation. We need something cleaner." Back at her apartment, Olivia found a small envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a handwritten note. You have more friends than you think. Check the end of quarter vendor list, Horizon Logistics. No signature. No return address. Olivia frowned. Horizon Logistics was a minor partner on a Caldwell project. She opened her laptop, pulled up old files, and traced 2 payments that split into 3 shells before landing in a boutique account linked to a social media agency, Madison's agency. Her heart didn't race. It settled. This was familiar ground. Numbers, patterns, intent. She saved everything and sent the file to Helena with a short line. Confirm and timestamp. Quietly. The rest of the day pressed in. Reporters called. Old acquaintances texted to check on her with messages that sounded like fishing lines. By late afternoon, she took a walk to clear her head. On the corner market stoop, she ran into Mrs. Alvarez, the widow from her building who kept tomato plants and chipped paint cans. "Mihija," Mrs. Alvarez said, patting Olivia's hand. "People talk big when they're afraid. I know you. You don't push. You stand. That's stronger." Olivia felt something unclench. "Thank you." When she returned upstairs, Marcus was waiting at her door, tie loosened, eyes tight. "They moved faster than I thought." "How bad?" "Ethan's lawyers filed for a temporary injunction to suspend your voting rights until the questions are resolved. They're trying to freeze you out before the board meets." Olivia exhaled. "They want me sidelined and embarrassed." "They want you gone," Marcus said. "But listen, this judge is fair. We have standing. Helena's review will help, but we need something that shows intent, not just sloppiness." Olivia opened her laptop and turned the screen toward him. Horizon Logistics. Follow the trail to the social media agency, then to the boutique account. She tapped the mouse. It lands where Madison stands. Marcus's face changed. If this holds, it's not just leverage. It's leadership risk. And leadership risk, Olivia said, is a board's language. He nodded. "I'll file a notice of opposition tonight. Hearing is set for 8 a.m. tomorrow." The apartment went quiet. Outside, sirens faded. Inside, 2 cups of coffee cooled on the counter. Olivia sat at the table and folded her hands. She felt the fear. She let it be there. Then she put it to work. "I won't fight them with anger," she said. "I'll fight them with the truth." Marcus stood. "Try to sleep. I'll text at first light." He left. The lock clicked. Olivia looked at the envelope again, the neat handwriting, the unsteady letters. "More friends than you think." She closed her eyes, and for the first time all day, a memory rose. The early mornings when she and Ethan shared one cheap desk and believed in something simple: build well, do right. She had kept her half of that promise. A knock sounded at the door. Not Marcus, not a neighbor. 3 firm raps, official and dry. Olivia opened it to a young clerk holding a brown envelope. "Miss Bennett?" he asked. "Yes." He handed it over. "Notice of emergency hearing. 8 a.m. Judge Patel." Olivia thanked him, closed the door, and pressed the envelope flat on the table. She smoothed the paper with both hands, steady and slow. Tomorrow would decide whether she walked into that boardroom with a voice or watched them lock the doors without her. The courthouse was a tall, square building with no glamour, no chandeliers, just cold stone, fluorescent lights, and the faint smell of paper and ink. Olivia arrived early, wearing a charcoal gray suit and carrying only a slim folder. Marcus was already there, pacing in the hallway, outside Judge Patel's chambers. "Helena confirmed everything," he said in a low voice. "The Horizon Logistics trail is solid. Funds moved through Madison's agency in a way that violates corporate governance. It's not just sloppy, it's deliberate." Olivia's expression didn't change. "Will it be enough to stop the injunction?" "More than enough," Marcus said. "If the judge sees this, she won't just throw out their motion. She may order an inquiry into Ethan's leadership." The hearing started promptly at 8. Ethan sat across the aisle with his legal team, perfectly groomed in a navy suit. Madison was beside him, dressed in muted gray as if to project seriousness. She didn't look at Olivia, but Olivia could feel the tension radiating from her. Judge Patel wasted no time. "We are here regarding Caldwell Enterprises' request for a temporary injunction against Ms. Bennett's voting rights. Counsel, proceed." Ethan's attorney launched into a well-rehearsed argument about protecting company stability and avoiding conflicts of interest. He painted Olivia as a disruptive force, framing the gala incident as a calculated move to sway board sentiment. Marcus rose slowly. "Your Honor, The petitioner claims my client poses a risk to the company's stability. What they have failed to disclose is that the company's current leadership has been engaging in transactions that not only lack transparency, but directly benefit a personal associate. He opened the folder and handed a set of documents to the clerk. We have traced payments from Caldwell Enterprises through Horizon Logistics to an unlisted account tied to Ms. Madison Reed's marketing firm. These funds were reallocated from a housing development budget without proper board approval. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Madison's face stiffened. Ethan shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. Judge Patel flipped through the papers, her expression unreadable. Miss Reed, do you have any professional or financial connection to this account? Madison hesitated. I manage the firm, yes, but that will be sufficient, the judge said, her tone clipped. Ethan's attorney tried to redirect the focus, but the judge raised a hand. The court cannot in good conscience restrict Miss Bennett's rights under these circumstances. The motion for injunction is denied. Furthermore, I am ordering a preliminary review into the transactions presented here. Olivia didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply nodded as if acknowledging a piece of a much larger plan falling into place. When the hearing adjourned, Ethan caught up to her in the hallway. You're playing dirty, he said, his voice low. Olivia met his gaze. No, Ethan, I'm playing fair. It's just that you forgot what that looks like. She walked away, leaving him standing in the sterile hallway, the echo of her heels punctuating the silence. And for the first time, Ethan realized this wasn't a skirmish. This was a war he might actually lose. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited for a statement. Olivia gave none. She walked past the microphones and down the steps with Marcus at her side, the cool morning air clearing the last traces of fear from her chest. In the car, Marcus exhaled. We bought time. Now we turn it into position. Helena will start the review? Olivia asked. She already has, he said, holding up his phone. And there's more. An internal auditor just reached out through counsel, willing to cooperate under whistleblower protection. Name's Daniel Cho. Olivia nodded. Get him to Helena. Keep it quiet. They drove to a small conference room Marcus kept for sensitive meetings. No windows, no receptionist, nothing to overhear. Helena arrived with a folder thick enough to matter. She set it on the table and spoke without preface. The Horizon Trail proves a governance breach, Helena said. But Daniel's files suggest something bigger. Timing irregularities around two announcements, last quarter's profit guidance, and the ribbon cutting for the Harborview Tower. Olivia leaned forward. Window dressing? Worse, Helena said. A pull forward of pre-sales and a side agreement promising marketing bonuses if certain influencers posted targeted content. The funds routed through Madison's firm. It juiced optics before the gala. Marcus turned a page, reading fast. If the review confirms this, it undermines investor trust. The board can't ignore it. They'll try, that Helena replied, unless you give them a safer landing than Ethan. Olivia looked down at her hands, remembering those first months above the printing shop. The cheap desk, the shared thermos of coffee, the rules they swore they'd keep. Build well. Do right. She raised her eyes. I'll give them a landing. From her bag she took a flat, weathered envelope, tan paper, a blue ink signature fading at the edges. This has been in my safe for 12 years, she said. Founder's resolution, executed when we took our first institutional check. Ethan insisted on control. I insisted on a safeguard. Marcus scanned, then stopped. A leadership continuity clause, triggered by a formal review for conflict of interest. He read again, slower. Upon trigger, either founder may nominate an interim chair, subject to a simple majority at a special meeting. Helena's eyebrows rose. You can force a vote on the chair. I can nominate a stabilizing choice, Olivia said. Someone the board trusts more than Ethan, and far more than Madison. Who? Marcus asked. Olivia's answer was ready. Agnes Whitmore. Helena sat back, impressed. Agnes was the eldest board member, a first-round investor with a reputation for fairness and a long memory of who had kept promises when the company was small. She also disliked spectacle. Agnes will accept if it protects the company, Olivia said. And it will. The plan unfolded quickly. Marcus drafted the notice for a special meeting. Helena queued the documentation to the board's secure portal, time-stamped and clean. Olivia wrote a short letter, calm, respectful, focused on stewardship, not revenge. No accusations, just the clause, the nomination, the path forward. By late afternoon, the first tremor reached Ethan. He called. Olivia let it go to voicemail. He texted, "We can settle this privately." She set the phone face down and signed the notice. At 6, she met Agnes at a quiet tea room on Birch Street, far from the kind of places that end up tagged on social media. Agnes arrived with a cane and clear eyes. "I won't be used for theatrics," Agnes said without greeting. "You won't be," Olivia replied. "You'll be used for steadiness." They spoke for 20 minutes. Olivia outlined the clause, the court ruling, the review. She didn't embellish. Agnes listened, then nodded once. "If the company is under a cloud, it needs shade, not lightning. I'll allow my name." Olivia stood, gratitude warm and simple. "Thank you." Back in the car, Marcus's phone lit. "Board portal shows your notice delivered," he said. "Meeting set for 48 hours. Ethan is furious. Madison's PR is spinning, but the market's already whispering." Olivia watched the city slide past. Bus stops, grocery lines, windows lit with small lives that had nothing to do with empires. She felt steady, like stone set right in the river. When they reached her building, she stepped out into the cool evening and checked her messages. One new text. An unknown number. "More friends than you think. Check Harborview change orders. Suite PH2. Personal finishes. Not billed to personal. No signature." She forwarded it to Helena. She hung her coat, boiled water, and stood at the counter while steam rose from the kettle. The apartment was quiet again, but not heavy. A different quiet. The kind that comes just before a door opens. She poured tea, took a slow breath, and looked at the letter she'd sent, the clause she'd kept, the line she'd drawn. In 48 hours, the board would sit, the clause would stand, and Olivia Bennett would walk in with a single nomination that could remove Ethan's power in one vote. 48 hours could feel like a lifetime or a blink, depending on how you use them. Olivia used every minute with precision. The morning after serving the notice, she met with a stylist recommended by Helena. The woman was efficient, discreet, and understood instantly what Olivia needed. Not glamour, Olivia told her. Authority, respect, strength. By noon, her wardrobe had shifted from soft tones and understated cuts to tailored lines and deeper colors. Charcoal, navy, and forest green replaced beige and cream. A structured blazer replaced the cardigans she'd worn in quieter days. "You want them to remember you not as Ethan's wife," the stylist said, adjusting a lapel, "but as Olivia Bennett, co-founder." Next came the media. Marcus had been cautious, advising her to stay quiet, but Olivia knew silence could sometimes be mistaken for weakness. She arranged one interview, not with a flashy outlet, but with a respected financial journal, whose readership included many Caldwell investors. The piece focused on corporate governance, the responsibility of leadership, and the importance of protecting shareholder value. She never mentioned Ethan or Madison by name. The result was subtle but powerful. It reframed her as a steward of the company's future, rather than a disruptor of its present. Meanwhile, Helena and Daniel Cho worked through the Harborview change orders. The findings were worse than expected. Custom finishes for a penthouse unit, billed through project funds, with no personal payment logged. The unit in question? Reserved for special promotional purposes and currently under Madison's name. "Do we use it before or after the vote?" Marcus asked. "After," Olivia said without hesitation. "We win the chair first, then the review does the rest." The night before the meeting, Olivia sat at her desk, reviewing her remarks. She didn't need to persuade everyone, just enough to secure a simple majority. Her approach would be calm, factual, and forward-looking. The personal history would stay buried. She thought about her father's hands, stained with oil from the garage, and her mother counting coins at the kitchen table. They'd taught her that dignity wasn't loud. It was in showing up, in doing the work, in keeping your word even when no one's watching. Tomorrow, she would show up. The morning of the vote, the Caldwell boardroom was already humming when Olivia arrived. She walked in wearing a deep navy sheath dress under a fitted blazer, her hair swept into a low chignon, a single silver brooch on her lapel. Conversations dipped for just a second before resuming. Ethan was at the far end of the table, Madison beside him in a sharp white suit. Madison's eyes flicked over Olivia's appearance, and for the first time, there was no smirk, only calculation. Marcus slid into the seat next to Olivia, his briefcase clicking shut. "Everything's in motion," he murmured. Olivia set her notes on the table, her gaze steady. Good. Let's begin. And as the meeting was called to order, the air in the room shifted, quietly, almost imperceptibly, but enough that everyone knew the balance of power was no longer the same. 2 days after the vote, Caldwell Enterprises held its quarterly results briefing, a high-profile event live-streamed to investors and covered by the financial press. For the first time in years, Olivia walked into the press conference not as a guest, not as a shareholder in the back row, but as a voice the board had chosen to listen to. Agnes Whitmore presided over the meeting with her usual steady demeanor, but Olivia could feel the tension humming beneath the polished surface. Ethan sat 2 seats away from Agnes, still CEO but visibly diminished. Madison, as always, was at his side, flipping through her tablet and avoiding Olivia's gaze. The financial presentation began smoothly: charts, earnings summaries, market forecasts. But when the floor opened for questions, Olivia stood. "Madam Chair," she said, her voice carrying in the hushed room, "before we move to forward-looking statements, I believe it is in the company's interest to address certain matters that have recently come to light." Agnes gave a slight nod. "You have the floor." Olivia turned toward the projection screen. Marcus, seated near the tech operator, signaled for the first slide. Up came a clean, simple chart showing the Horizon Logistics payment trail. The lines traced from Caldwell's development budget to Horizon, then through a series of shells, and finally to a boutique account linked to Madison Reed's marketing firm. This transaction, Olivia said evenly, occurred without documented board approval. It represents a diversion of funds from the Harborview Tower project's housing budget. The next slide appeared, a photo of the Harborview penthouse interior, opulent and personalized, followed by the change orders showing special promotional finishes. Suite PH2, Olivia continued, was officially designated for promotional purposes. However, no marketing campaign featuring the unit was launched. The finishes were not billed to a personal account. The unit is currently under reservation in the name of Madison Reed. A low murmur moved through the room. Madison's face flushed, but she forced her chin higher. Ethan leaned toward his microphone. "This is a gross misrepresentation." Olivia's gaze cut to him. "The documentation is available for review in the board's secure portal. Time-stamped, signed, and verified by our own legal department." Agnes raised a hand to still the noise. "These are serious claims. The board will treat them accordingly." But Olivia wasn't finished. She clicked to the final slide. A simple screenshot of a message chain between Madison's agency and Caldwell's marketing division discussing pre-launch influencer bonuses tied directly to last quarter's inflated sales numbers. "The integrity of this company," Olivia said, her voice steady, "depends on accountability. The shareholders deserve transparency. The employees deserve leadership that serves their interests, not personal luxuries." When she sat down, the room was silent except for the sound of reporters typing furiously. Agnes cleared her throat. "This meeting will recess for a closed board session, members only." As they filed out, Madison brushed past Olivia, her whisper sharp enough to cut. "You think you've won?" Olivia didn't look at her. "This isn't winning, Madison. This is telling the truth." And in that moment, Madison's eyes showed something Olivia had never seen before: real fear. 2 days after the vote, Caldwell Enterprises held its quarterly results briefing, a high-profile event live-streamed to investors and covered by the financial press. For the first time in years, Olivia walked into the press conference not as a guest, not as a shareholder in the back row, but as a voice the board had chosen to listen to. Agnes Whitmore presided over the meeting with her usual steady demeanor, but Olivia could feel the tension humming beneath the polished surface. Ethan sat 2 seats away from Agnes, still CEO but visibly diminished. Madison, as always, was at his side, flipping through her tablet and avoiding Olivia's gaze. The financial presentation began smoothly: charts, earnings summaries, market forecasts. But when the floor opened for questions, Olivia stood. "Madam Chair," she said, her voice carrying in the hushed room, "before we move to forward-looking statements, I believe it is in the company's interest to address certain matters that have recently come to light." Agnes gave a slight nod. "You have the floor." Olivia turned toward the projection screen. Marcus, seated near the tech operator, signaled for the first slide. Up came a clean, simple chart showing the Horizon Logistics payment trail. The lines traced from Caldwell's development budget to Horizon, then through a series of shells, and finally to a boutique account linked to Madison Reed's marketing firm. This transaction, Olivia said evenly, occurred without documented board approval. It represents a diversion of funds from the Harborview Tower project's housing budget. The next slide appeared, a photo of the Harborview penthouse interior, opulent and personalized, followed by the change orders showing special promotional finishes. Suite PH2, Olivia continued, was officially designated for promotional purposes. However, no marketing campaign featuring the unit was launched. The finishes were not billed to a personal account. The unit is currently under reservation in the name of Madison Reed. A low murmur moved through the room. Madison's face flushed, but she forced her chin higher. Ethan leaned toward his microphone. "This is a gross misrepresentation." Olivia's gaze cut to him. "The documentation is available for review in the board's secure portal. Time-stamped, signed, and verified by our own legal department." Agnes raised a hand to still the noise. "These are serious claims. The board will treat them accordingly." But Olivia wasn't finished. She clicked to the final slide, a simple screenshot of a message chain between Madison's agency and Caldwell's marketing division, discussing pre-launch influencer bonuses tied directly to last quarter's inflated sales numbers. "The integrity of this company," Olivia said, her voice steady, "depends on accountability. The shareholders deserve transparency. The employees deserve leadership that serves their interests, not personal luxuries." When she sat down, the room was silent, except for the sound of reporters typing furiously. Agnes cleared her throat. "This meeting will recess for a closed board session. Members only." As they filed out, Madison brushed past Olivia, her whisper sharp enough to cut. "You think you've won?" Olivia didn't look at her. "This isn't winning, Madison. This is telling the truth." And in that moment, Madison's eyes showed something Olivia had never seen before, real fear. The closed session convened in the smaller boardroom, a room meant for confidential discussions, away from the cameras and the press. Heavy curtains muted the daylight, and the low hum of the air conditioner was the only sound as everyone took their seats. Agnes placed her hands on the table. "We will address the allegations immediately. Legal has verified the documents Ms. Bennett presented. I will now open the floor for discussion." The first to speak was Director Lang, a veteran investor with a reputation for blunt honesty. "I backed this company because I believed in its long-term vision. If these findings are accurate, they show a lapse in leadership ethics. That is unacceptable." Several heads nodded. Ethan leaned forward, his voice controlled but strained. "I have led this company to record growth. We are in the middle of expansion. This is not the time for—" "This is exactly the time," Agnes cut in. "When the integrity of leadership is questioned, hesitation only deepens the damage." Madison shifted in her chair, crossing her legs. "These accusations are being weaponized for personal reasons." Miss Reed," Director Hale interrupted. "The documentation ties your firm directly to misallocated funds. That is not a personal issue, it's a fiduciary one." The words landed like a gavel strike. Madison's composure cracked, her voice rising. "Ethan approved everything. If there's blame—" She stopped, realizing too late what she'd admitted. The room went still. Agnes turned to the legal counsel seated near the wall. "Please note that statement for the record." From there, the tide shifted swiftly. One by one, board members voiced concerns about investor confidence, public perception, and the risk of regulatory scrutiny. Ethan's rebuttals grew shorter, his arguments thinner. Madison said nothing more. Finally, Agnes spoke. "Given the circumstances, I propose an immediate leadership review. Until its conclusion, Ethan Caldwell will step aside from day-to-day operations. An interim CEO will be appointed to ensure stability." The vote was called. Hands rose, 9 in favor, 3 against. Ethan sat back, the color draining from his face. Madison's eyes darted between him and Olivia, as though searching for some lifeline that wasn't there. When the meeting adjourned, Olivia gathered her folder without hurry. She didn't smile, she didn't gloat, but as she stepped into the hallway, she caught Marcus's nod, a quiet acknowledgement that the plan had landed exactly as intended. Outside the building, reporters swarmed, hungry for updates. Agnes gave a short statement confirming the leadership change and promising full cooperation with the review. Olivia said nothing, slipping into a waiting car. As the city passed by in the window, she thought about the years she had stayed silent, the battles she'd let slide in the name of peace. That chapter was over. Her phone buzzed, a text from the same unknown number as before. "Check tomorrow's headlines. You'll like them." Olivia looked out at the skyline, the weight in her chest replaced by something lighter, steadier. The war wasn't over, but the balance had shifted for good. And for the first time, Ethan and Madison were no longer the ones deciding what came next. Caldwell CEO steps aside amid misuse of funds probe. Marketing ties to luxury penthouse raise ethics questions. Olivia read them over coffee, the steam curling between her fingers. She hadn't spoken to the press, but the facts were doing the work for her. Madison's face was on every screen. Photos from the gala, clips from past interviews, now overlaid with words like conflict of interest and questionable expenditures. Ethan's image was different, serious, tight-lipped, a man suddenly aware that the empire he had built could slip away in silence, without even the courtesy of a fight he could win. Agnes called mid-morning. "The interim CEO will be Daniel Cho. The board trusts him, and frankly, he owes you his job." "I didn't do this for a favor," Olivia replied. "I know. That's why it worked," Agnes said. "You'll be glad to know the review will be public. It's going to clear more than your name. It's going to remind people whose vision built this place." By afternoon, Helena had sent over a draft statement for Olivia to approve. It was simple, direct, and focused on the company's future. No personal digs, no lingering bitterness, just a call for integrity and stability. Olivia signed it without changes. That evening, she returned to the Clarendon Hotel, not for a gala this time, but for a small dinner with allies who had stood with her through the board fight. The restaurant was quiet, lit by warm amber lamps. Marcus was there, Helena, and even Agnes, her cane resting against the table leg. "To principles," Marcus toasted. "To persistence," Helena added. Olivia lifted her glass. "To building something worth keeping." After dinner, she lingered outside the hotel, the same marble steps where Madison had once told her, "You can't stop us." The rain had stopped, but the pavement still glistened under the streetlights. She remembered that moment vividly, the calm smile she'd worn, the certainty in Madison's eyes. Now the certainty was hers. A black sedan slowed at the curb. Inside, she saw Ethan in the back seat. The window rolled down halfway. "Enjoying yourself?" he asked. "This isn't enjoyment, Ethan," she said. "It's relief." His jaw worked as if he wanted to argue, but no words came. The window rolled up, and the sedan pulled away. Olivia turned toward the street, her reflection catching in the glass doors. She didn't look like the woman from the early years, tired from late nights and compromises. She didn't look like the woman from the divorce, wounded and unsure. She looked like someone who had chosen her own ground and won on it. And for the first time, she realized she didn't need to prove anything to them anymore. The weeks that followed felt different, quieter, but not empty. Olivia's days were filled with purposeful meetings, not battles. She began working with Daniel Cho and Agnes on a new initiative, a transparency program that would open Caldwell Enterprises' finances to shareholders in a way few corporations dared attempt. The press, once skeptical, now painted her as a reformer, someone who had returned not for revenge, but for restoration. Even outlets that had run Ethan's spin after the gala were publishing editorials about her measured, principled leadership. One morning she visited the Harborview Tower. The penthouse suite, Suite PH2, was empty now, the custom finishes gleaming under the soft light. It no longer belonged to Madison, and it never would again. Olivia stood in the main room, looking out at the harbor, and felt no satisfaction in taking it from her. The real victory was knowing it would soon become a community space for residents, a decision Daniel had supported without hesitation. Outside the building, a few construction workers recognized her. One approached, wiping his hands on his vest. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say, a lot of us heard what you did. Not many people stand up when it costs them something." Olivia smiled. "It only costs you if you lose yourself. I decided a long time ago I wasn't going to do that." In the evenings, she returned to her apartment, a space that felt less like a retreat and more like a command post. The same quiet that had once been heavy now felt earned. She started writing again. Notes, reflections, even the beginnings of a memoir about building and protecting something worth keeping. One Friday afternoon, she received an envelope in the mail. No return address, just her name in that same steady handwriting she had seen twice before. Inside was a single sentence: "They underestimated you because you let them." She set it on her desk and left it there, a reminder not of bitterness, but of the truth. Power isn't always in what you take, it's in what you choose to keep. By the end of the quarter, Caldwell Enterprises had regained investor confidence. Ethan had resigned from the CEO role entirely, citing personal reasons. Madison had vanished from the press circuit. The company's stock was steady, the projects on track, and the culture, slowly, was shifting back toward the values Olivia had once built into it. On the last day of the quarter, she stood on the balcony of her apartment, looking out over the city as the sun dipped low. The streets below bustled with ordinary lives: children in backpacks, couples holding hands, a man carrying groceries in one arm and a bouquet in the other. This was why she had fought. Not for titles, not for headlines, but to leave something better than she had found it. She took a slow breath, letting the air fill her chest. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang the hour. And with that, Olivia Bennet closed the chapter, not with triumph over someone else, but with the quiet victory of having kept her own name untarnished. Spring came early that year. The city shook off its winter coat, trees dusted in pale green, cafe tables spilling onto sidewalks again. Olivia walked through it all with a lighter step, as though the long, cold season that had wrapped around her life had finally broken. 3 months had passed since the leadership change at Caldwell Enterprises. Daniel Cho had proven to be the steady hand she knew he could be, guiding the company through the investigation and implementing the transparency program they had discussed. Investors responded positively, employees more so. Ethan's name still appeared occasionally in the business press, usually in connection with past leadership or former CEO. Madison's, however, had almost vanished. The penthouse that once symbolized her place in Ethan's world now symbolized the opposite, a reminder that shortcuts and vanity projects always leave a mark. Olivia didn't waste energy following their downfall. She had learned that true closure isn't watching someone else fall, it's knowing you can move forward without them in your shadow. Her own days were full, but not frantic. She spent part of her time consulting with smaller, values-driven companies, often those run by women who were fighting for space in boardrooms that looked a lot like Caldwell's had. She spoke at a few conferences, not as a scandal survivor, but as a builder, a strategist, a leader who had been underestimated and had outlasted the underestimation. One afternoon, she was invited to a business school to speak to graduating students. Standing at the podium, she looked out at rows of bright eyes, notebooks open, pens ready. She didn't talk about the gossip columns or the courtroom drama. She talked about the quiet work, the late nights above the printing shop, the promises kept when no one was watching, the slow discipline of building something real. When the lecture ended, a young woman came up to her. "Miss Bennet, how do you know when it's worth fighting for something?" Olivia thought for a moment. When you can picture yourself standing on the other side of the fight, still able to look yourself in the eye. Walking back to her car that day, she realized she had just described her own journey without meaning to. Later that week, she visited her parents' graves, bringing fresh flowers. She sat on the cool stone bench between them, telling them quietly about the company, the changes, and how the name Bennet now stood for more than survival. It stood for stewardship. She liked to think they'd understand. As the sun dipped behind the trees, she lingered, not in sadness, but in a kind of still joy. For the first time in years, there was no unfinished business tugging at her. The fight was done, and she had walked away with her dignity intact. On a soft Sunday morning, Olivia sat by her apartment window with a notebook open, the city humming gently below. She had been writing more these days, not corporate reports or strategy memos, but personal reflections. The act of putting words on paper grounded her, a reminder that the story she had lived through was hers to shape, not theirs to define. One page was a simple list titled "What Was Worth It." It wasn't about victories over Ethan or Madison, it was about the moments that had restored her. The first board meeting where she spoke without hesitation. The Harborview penthouse keys being handed over for community use. The thank you note from a young project manager who said she felt safer speaking up after watching Olivia do the same. The list was longer than she expected. She closed the notebook with a small smile. That afternoon, she took a walk through the harbor district. It had been years since she could do that without feeling the weight of the Harborview Tower looming over her. Today, she stepped inside without an invitation. The lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh flowers. A receptionist recognized her and offered a tour of the new community space. Children's laughter echoed in the converted lounge, where the penthouse's custom finishes still gleamed, now serving as a gathering place for residents. A mural painted by local artists covered one wall, bright blues and golds swirling into the outline of a city skyline. Olivia traced the mural's edge with her eyes, feeling a quiet pride. Not the sharp thrill of a win, but the deep settled satisfaction of seeing something broken made whole again. On her way out, she passed a newsstand. The headline on a folded business magazine caught her eye. Caldwell Enterprises, Rebuilding Trust from the Inside Out. Inside, the article credited Agnes Daniel and shareholder advocate Olivia Bennett for leading the transformation. She bought the copy, not as a trophy, but as a keepsake. Back at her apartment, she placed the magazine next to the anonymous notes she had kept, the ones that had led her to the evidence she needed. She still didn't know who had sent them, and maybe she never would. It didn't matter. Sometimes allies came in the form of quiet hands nudging you forward when the road was steep. That evening, she stood on her balcony as the sun burned the horizon gold. The city was alive beneath her, endless stories unfolding in windows and streets. She thought of all the people she'd met who carried their own private battles. Some they'd win, some they wouldn't. She knew now that survival wasn't the measure, integrity was. Holding to it when it cost you something, protecting it when it would be easier to let it go. Olivia took one last sip of tea, set the cup down, and breathed in the evening air. The chapter was over. And in the space it left behind, she felt something rare and weightless, the freedom to begin again, on her own terms,